Hi.
Hello.
Last time I recommended this book by Michael J. Gorman, Reading Revelation Responsibly. And I mentioned at that time that there were 3 points that stood out for me that helped me with the book of Revelation. The 3 points are counterculture, nonconformity, and resistance. So this new way for me of looking at the book made me appreciate that Christians of any time in history were being advised on how to live, how to be countercultural in all generations and in all places. You may remember in our video series on Humpty Dumpty hermeneutics, we underlined some basic rules of Bible interpretation. What did this book, passage, or text mean to its original audience? So I wanted David to read a couple of paragraphs, some choice paragraphs from Gorman's book that establish its truth, its original historical context. So if you could read from page 40 and 41.
Sure. Nearly all interpreters of Revelation recognize that the entire book is a critique and parody of the Roman Empire and of the cult of the emperor that was rampant in the Roman province of Asia in the second half of the 1st century. Although the word Rome does not appear in the document, Rome is portrayed symbolically as Babylon, that great enemy city of God's people. Revelation parodies and criticizes both the oppressive nature of imperial power and the blasphemous claims made about it. This twofold critique is directed in a focused way at the imperial cult because that is where Roman power and its allegedly sacred character coalesced. Put simply, the imperial cult was an elaborate God and country phenomenon, or type of civic or civil religion, that in various ways attributed a sacred character to the Roman Empire and to the emperor himself. The cult was the concrete manifestation of an ideology, a political theology, consisting of 3 main convictions, and here are the 3 main convictions. 1, the gods have chosen Rome. 2, Rome and its emperor are agents of the gods' rule, will, salvation, and presence among human beings. 3, Rome manifests the gods' blessings, security, peace, justice, faithfulness, fertility among those who submit to Rome's rule.
So Rome here is identified as Babylon, and Christians were being warned that she would guarantee you peace, security, and prosperity if you recognize the emperor as Lord and God on earth, your ultimate authority.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to be warned about this, or else you could fall into it.
So we think of Revelation's great enemies of God, the beast and the woman, as being evil, but if they had presented themselves as evil, if their public image was evil, they could not have succeeded in deceiving the whole world, which Revelation plainly says they did. So what was it that they gave in the way of benefaction? So the beast was not just brutal, which he was. The Roman Empire was the most brutal ever seen yet, trampling down the whole earth. Mm-hmm. But the beast in his public persona, his face, the emperor, was a benefactor. He was the savior of Rome. He was both Lord and King. This is why Lord of Lords and King of Kings in Revelation is so meaningful. What were the benefactions he was offering? Well, he was offering peace, prosperity, and security. And who doesn't want those things? And then he was also offering some good stuff other than that was not necessarily off limits to Christians and Jews. Here's a description Gorman gives of what imperial theology looked like in the 1st century. We can find imperial theology in the best writers of the day, such as Virgil and Epictetus, but it was particularly important for Rome to capture the hearts and minds of common folk, and that was done especially through the media. Processions, games, spectacles, statues, standards carried by soldiers, coins. 1st century coins depict the emperor as a god, actually as various deities, as universal savior and ruler, And it's the one who made wars to cease and brought peace as the subjugator of enemies and so on. So although he was crushing the world around Rome, he was publicly presenting himself as the bringer of peace.
Yeah.
It sounds familiar.
Yeah, and that would be appealing to anyone, even the people who are under subjection to Rome. That would be appealing. So my question would be, when I was reading these things, was I had never gone back to the time of John to think about what it was like for the people living then. So how many modern readers of Revelation do that? Go back to the time of the writing of the book and the situation of the book. So John is in exile when he's writing this because he's been resisting the beast or the cult, the empire cult. So what about all the Christians who were resisting the empire cult? How did they react, and what was the cost to them?
Well, we think it's easy to differentiate between the enemies of God and the friends of God, but it's not that easy, as we ourselves know in this world today with propaganda. And the propaganda of the time presented, as I said before, Caesar is your friend, is your ultimate friend. Really, he's God on earth. What could be better than that? So it was very hard for all of us, because Christians too want peace and security and prosperity, to differentiate between the gifts that Caesar was offering and the ultimate gifts, of course, that Christianity offered. So I guess the way we might view it is if you've ever read the novels of George Orwell, 1984, you realize there Big Brother is presented as benefactor, but he's very ominous. He makes people disappear. But then there's another vision of the future, the utopian or dystopian future, written around the same time back in the 40s by Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, where Big Brother in Huxley's world, although he's not called that, has chosen a different way to oppress people. He sedates them into submission. He gives them what they want. He gives them pleasures, small pleasures, every day, and distracts them.
Right.
And I think Huxley's vision of the future has been vindicated in the Western world. That's us.
Yeah. There is a quote, another one that I wanted to read. I'll read this one on page 46 that Gorman makes to kind of bring this up to a modern day comparison of what you just said. Page 46. All right. He says, "It is more important for us to see Revelation as a critique of secular power, wherever and however it expresses itself oppressively, and especially as a critique of such power that is deemed sacred and granted devotion and allegiance." And then further down he quotes from J. Nelson Craybill, who he says has written a study of Revelation entitled Apocalypse and Allegiance, Worship, Politics, and Devotion in the Book of Revelation. He writes, he writes perceptively that although, and this is the quote, "no Western nation has outright ruler worship today, we do have political, military, and economic powers to which millions give unquestioned allegiance." So that's the part that impressed me, was unquestioned allegiance. So we can get seduced because we're not seeing it as something worship. We're not seeing it as something to do with God at all. Our viewpoint of our government. So we need to pay attention to the warning that's in the book of Revelation.
More than they did.
Yes, because I think it's easier for us to cross that line of devotion without even realizing we're doing it.
Right. So I think of the two pictures again in Revelation. One is of the woman who rides the beast, and she is one picture of Rome as the seducer. She holds the cup of abominations in her hand, and the abominations, of course, represent her offering pleasure, her offering her seductive wares to the world. And the picture around 17 and 18 is of a Rome that revels in luxury and offers her luxuries to the world. That's her seductive power.
Yeah.
But in addition to the sedative that's in the cup, this seductive power she has the beastly power too. It's the same thing. Rome under one guise and under another. The beast, though, is not the one we need to fear in the West right now. The one we need to fear is the whore. Yeah. And in the picture of the beast back in chapter 13, you realize even he doesn't rely on brutality, although he's beastly. The boot that he wears and the sword that he bears are not the weapons he most often chooses to use. The weapon he uses most often is economic strangulation. And here's where you need chapters 1 to 3, because in chapters 1 to 3, you see that the 7 churches are suffering from that persecution, that form of persecution, more than they are suffering martyrdom. Yeah. There's only a couple of mentions of martyrdom, but there's a lot of indicators in the first 7 churches' descriptions that economic strangulation, i.e. the closing of the membership to the guilds, and if you couldn't get in a guild, it was not like not being able to get into a union, not having any economic protection for yourself and your family.
Yeah. I don't think we even, well, at least I didn't, when reading those things, make that connection, that it was their resistance that was causing them to have those problems.
Right. And then you need that fact to interpret chapter 13 properly. The beast only kills when the other measures don't work. And in chapter 13, let me just read that passage, and you see the connections that's made between these various themes. It was given to him, that is the beast, to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and the authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation was given to him. And all who dwell on the earth will worship him, everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who has been slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. And here's where the warning comes in. In the middle of the description, we have an application to the church of all centuries. If anyone is destined for captivity, to captivity he goes. If anyone kills with the sword he must be killed. Here is the perseverance and the faith of the saints. So the Christians are being called then and through all centuries to persevere when the weapons of the warfare, which are wielded by both the whore and the beast, fail. They will resort to violence. Now, the minority of Christians died in those centuries. The majority of them were ignored, economically strangled, persecuted in any way that was available. But most of them, many of them, were seduced.
Yes. So
just as we are today.
Yeah. So that again, those 3 points that he really highlights well in the book are counterculture, nonconformity, and resistance. And those can be very bad consequences for you when you follow through with those.
Because we all want peace, security, and prosperity, and the beast, therefore, is going to concentrate on taking those 3 assurances away from those who oppose him. Thank you, Michael Gorman.
Yes.
And Vivian.